Hello everyone. We'll get started shortly. So let's take some time to add our names to the attendees list. Let me share the meeting minutes. And yeah, now it's also a good time to add any topics that you that you have to discuss on the call, or uh, work you have been doing that you would like to show on the call. So if you have any, uh, feel free to add that to the meeting minutes. Let's give it another minute to let others join in. All right. I think we are already 2 after, and let me share the meeting minutes again for those who joined right now. And I think we have a couple of new folks on the call. So Abhijay Jain, like, is this your first time on the Meshery development call?
Not in this meeting, in development meet, but in meeting minutes, I attend a meeting previously.
Nice. Nice to see you again then.
Yeah, thanks.
Uh, all right. So we can start off this meeting with a progress update on the refactoring Meshery UI initiative. Nitish is, yeah.
Nitish mentioned he's going to be, we were just on a call. He's going to be a little bit late.
All right. Okay, then related to that, maybe Richa can start us off with some of her work. Richa, like, do you like demo what you've been working on?
Yeah, hey, how are you, Nivindu?
Yep, doing good, Richa.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, last couple of weeks, first I worked on good first issues and took 3 issues and which are fully merged, and to just be familiar with the code base. So after that, I got familiar. After that, I got introduced to this PDF Excel, and I then took a calendar component and made it an independent calendar component, and which is also merged. And as of now, I'm working in autocomplete, adding autocomplete component using downshift dependency. That is also complete, but I'm facing some issues in the autocomplete thing. So I'm working on it, and I need to address, there are a couple of comments in that PR. I need to address that as well. So yeah, and today morning I just got a very weird issue and it says that migration is needed. So I'm in touch with Nitesh. So I think that I will be working in migration stuff also, because I'm not able to locally develop Meshery in my system now. There's this weird error coming when I'm running npm run dev proxy. I posted in the channel also today morning.
Yeah. So Aditya or Manav, you guys might have some advice there. So migration in terms of front end, huh? Oh, by the way, Rika, nice to talk to you. Nice.
Same here, Lee. How are you?
Yeah, lots of chatting, no talking. So this is.
Yeah, same here, Lee. How are you?
Good, good.
Yeah.
You come on the call and then talk about the 3 PRs you already have under your belt. Okay. Not wasting any time.
Yeah.
Cool. So migration though. So certainly we have data migration that happens for info that's persisted to Meshery's database.
Mm-hmm.
But then migration, maybe because you're working with a newer version of Next.js, newer version of React, newer version of Material UI, maybe.
Okay.
I didn't see your issue.
It's a Meshery UI channel.
Okay. So Aditya
I
Manav.
attached the screenshot also, the error which is coming. So I'm not able to load the Meshery locally. Yeah. It says that some function is deprecated.
There are 3 other contributors that I just prattled off that might have a look. Any of you 3, have you looked at that issue by chance?
I'm taking a look right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So are you using MUI v5 there?
Yeah.
Because MUI v5 probably is removing the breakpoint system and hidden component, and there are a lot of component that has been changed and or like completely removed. So you have to do a migration for it. So there is a tool like you should go to like v4 to v5 migration
Sorry,
page,
can
and
you
then
repeat it?
so you should have visited MUI v4 to v5 migration page. So all these points are written down, like all the considerations you should
Okay.
should be aware of while doing so. I most probably it is because theme.breakpoints has been deprecated too. It's been maybe removed.
But this issue seems to be quite new because I was working on the refactoring yesterday, and we've been using MUI 5 from the beginning with breakpoints. So I don't know how this came up right now.
Till today morning it was working fine, but suddenly after noon it stopped working and I'm getting this error.
Yeah, so it's probably, I don't think it's something to do with the breakpoints.
So issue signifies like theme.breakpoints is undefined. So probably the theme is not the theme property has been changed in v5 or something, because theme.breakpoints is undefined. That's why .up is not able to is not able to being called with the break in chain.
So should I file an issue for migration or do it locally for my system?
Abhishek,
I was just seeing the MUI v5 doc, and breakpoints is available there.
Okay.
So probably you should file an issue like the complete code where it is originating from, so that we can collectively take a look on it.
So I have an access to filing an issue, right?
Hope so. Yeah, most probably yes.
I
Lee
will
would
ping you if I get stuck somewhere.
Sure.
other comments here on these closed PRs or any of the open PRs?
So the second PR, the drop down across in doc, there is a comment and I have not addressed it because I was working in calendar component and autocomplete component. And after that, side by side, I am looking in the loading spinner animation thing also using SVG RST. So I have not fully involved in this PR, but I will do it as soon as possible.
Sounds good. Any other comments?
No, I will just do the migration stuff first because I'm not able to build it locally. So I'm stuck there.
All right. So, yep. So Richa will file an issue for that, and yep.
Yeah.
All right. We'll come back to the other updates in the Meshery UI after Nitish joins. So moving over to the next topic, Lee or Ashish, would you like to show the compatibility, the compatibility metrics?
Mr. Tiwari, if you're comfortable, please take it away.
You can show it.
All right. Yeah, let me. Good. Okay. Yeah, I will. People, I got to imagine people get sick of listening to me on this call. So one of the calls we were on previously, Miss Jared had mentioned that he bumps into the occasional bug. And as we go to over the hump on v0.5 headed into like landing v0.6, it's time to put more structure in place around quality, around how tests are done, unit testing, integration testing. I was getting a lesson from Mario last time on integration testing and functional testing and the difference. And so there's lots of testing that we need to do. And there's a number of tests that happen, but many more tests to be built out. And so Nitish or Navendu is going to show us how far along we are in terms of coverage for integration tests in accordance with the .6 test plan. To help bolster this effort and make sure that we all can understand, like not only can the contributors understand kind of where we're at in terms of what's being tested and what the status of those tests are, but also for users and for contributors, what's the current compatibility of a given Meshery release with a certain Kubernetes version, a certain version of each individual service mesh, a particular cloud, like there's a long list of things to be compatible with. So the project can use a compatibility matrix. That's something that the compatibility matrix, more tests, as these are things that we've been looking at for a long time and been acknowledging the need for a long time. And the need for them increases as we get closer to a 1.0. So we want to put in some framework and structure early on. Ashish has been championing the creation of integration tests that run for each individual Meshery adapter. So if you'd like to look at how those integration tests work or how they run, if you take a random example and go to, well, I guess this won't be random. I'm specifically could go to Meshery Istio. These tests, he should be propagating the rest of these today, Mr. Tiwari, I hope. But the way that the integration test for each individual Meshery adapter is being run right now is through Github Workflow. So we use a lot of GitHub workflows here. Right now, these are structured in two separate workflows, which I question why that is. I know there's a logic behind it, but I would still question that logic. Like ideally, there's one set of tests that run. These tests run every time that someone submits a pull request. These tests run after the pull request merges. these tests, we're always running checks and tests. We're always doing unit tests, and we're always making sure that things build, and then we're verifying that, like, since this is Golang centric here in the adapters, you can look at like any of the other workflows about what things are checked, what code is reviewed, how it's linted, how security is checked for, what static analysis is going on, all those things. Those have been in the project for a long time. What's relatively new are these integration tests. So once the code is compiled and the static analysis and security analysis and other things have passed, now that there's a statically compiled piece of Golang, let's go ahead and run it. Let's get a Kubernetes environment. Let's bring up Meshery server. Let's run this thing and test its functionality, and let's do an integration test. And that's mostly what these two new workflows are about. And they'll go through and test a number of things. Ashish, do you want to talk about how many integration tests using this Istio adapter as the example are being run? If we've got anything left that's uncovered, that's not tested?
So as these are end-to-end tests, one of the core capabilities of any adapter, any Meshery adapter, is to deploy a service mesh along with a bunch of add-ons. The core workflow is pretty configurable. So it has a bunch of inputs, it has a bunch of outputs, and currently we're using only adapters to test. Currently we're only testing adapters with the help of that core workflow. So it takes a bunch of inputs about what are we testing. So the version is fetched dynamically. So for example, at each particular time when we run these tests, we fetch the latest version of that particular service mesh. For example, in this case, it's Istio. So we set all these input parameters, and then the output parameter is just a JSON which has the test results for us, which has a bunch of metadata and a bunch of assertions that we make, and these assertions are also configurable. So for example, in the case of Istio adapter, the assertions are that hey, is there a Istioed control plane? Do we have the egress gateway? Do we have the ingress gateway? Do we have the Grafana add-on and the Prometheus add-on in the Istio system namespace? If yes, then basically, yeah, the tests are passing. If one of these is if even one of these is passing, that it is considered as the partially tests are passing, but it's not actually passing, it's partial. Otherwise it's failing. So basically every time a pull request is made, there are three stages. First stage is to actually create that pattern file. So if I glossed over, a pattern file is what we are using, because pattern file, we kind of want everything in Meshery to use pattern file. A pattern file is used, a pattern file has a bunch of services, and it can be used to deploy your service mesh or anything that you can deploy with your Kubernetes and service mesh normal manifest. You can deploy that with a pattern file. So we are using pattern file in this particular. So this workflow is very pattern file specific. It'll only run your tests if you have a pattern file to deploy and a bunch of assertions to make. So this we're in the pattern file, we're only deploying service meshes for now for these tests and a bunch of add-ons. It will deploy those. So for normal pull request, what's going to happen is it will create that pattern file. It will make all these assertions, and if the tests pass, it means that this pull request didn't actually mess anything up. When it gets merged, so that means that hey, we should actually publish these results somewhere. So in that case, those results would be published to the UI. I think Lee showed you, or he can go ahead and this compatibility matrix. The yellow one means that the partially tests are passing, green means the tests are passing. So the Istio thing, the Istio rows that you're seeing, they are the actual data. So for example, the PR is merged. Whenever the PR is merged in Istio adapter, that is counted as the component version is counted as edge. So you're getting these extra data about, hey, we ran this thing on the Meshery server version v0.6 rc2, and if you click on any of these things, you'll actually get what were the assertions that were made. So if you click on Istio, the Istio was running, egress gateway was running, Grafana add-on was running, Prometheus add-on was running, and you have some extra bunch of metadata like the time it ran on, etc., etc. Whenever a release would be made, instead of the component version being edge, you'll actually get that particular release version there. And after incorporating this thing in all of the adapters, this matrix would be actually can be used as a single source of truth for if something fails, we can direct people to go ahead and look at this compatibility matrix, and we can actually, because the things are timestamped, so even if when a PR gets merged, we can go back and see which PR messed things up. So this will kind of help us to make the whole system a bit more resilient, considering we have a lot of adapters and it gets hard to manage them all. So this will help us to make sure that each adapter is doing what it is supposed to do. So yeah, that's kind of everything about these integration tests in a nutshell.
Thoughts. This is a start, but there's a few things that are maybe wrong about this approach, and there's a few things that can be enhanced about it as well. Feedback, thoughts? Jared, you might have some feedback. Mario, you might have some thoughts.
Well, with regards to kind of compatibility matrix, what is the plan for support? Are you doing like N-1 or what was that?
No,
Because
in -50. Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah, in -30, in -50, in minus a lot. Like I know it sounds insane. Yeah, but yep, that's the goal.
Okay. All right. It's going to be a lot of tests.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, this is good though. This is a good start.
So the first
one thing to okay, I'll go ahead. Add am I audible? Am I audible?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, you are.
So one thing to add here might be, because as these test results we get more and more test results, the table will be huge. So we can group things in a very smart way. We have to find the parameter on which we should group these things, because there are a bunch of them. So should we group them on the basis of the service mesh? Should we group them on the basis of service mesh type, or should we go on the Meshery component version type? So for example, every time a PR is merged, if 15 PRs are merged, you'd get these 15 results. So the most reliable source is the recent one. So we can have the recent one displayed here, and when we click on the recent one, we can get all the past results in another table maybe. So basically the thing is to break it one table into multiple tables, and this original table can have the most recent data. The older data can be thrown off in separate tables, which would be hyperlinked here.
That makes sense.
Other feedback, other thoughts.
Maybe we can also run this test on multiple Kubernetes versions. So maybe not subsequent minor patch releases or anything, but like if there are major changes, then we can select those, handpick those version and then test.
Just actually rethinking our conversation a second ago, Lee, regarding compatibility matrix, and you said N-50 in regards to what? I guess I should clarify that a bit. Are you talking about Meshery version, service mesh version, Kubernetes version, all of it? I don't know.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and actually, there's a reason why Jared is asking again, because like the answer to his first question, if I were Jared and I heard the response back, I would think I would laugh and walk away. Like, you're insane. I don't know what you're like. You can't keep up with that many. You can't remain that compatible. Like, so it really requires some explanation. To your second question, Jared, that the N-50, that focus is really about it's oriented towards service mesh version. lesser toward Kubernetes and not really toward Meshery, more like the current version of Meshery is intended to be that many releases backwards compatible. That and this will get really hairy as we go to the further along the project goes. That actually, let me not dig into it because I think it'll confuse some folks and it's probably not worth it. But to Jared's point, like here, let me give an example of the focus of that N-50 answer. And some of us are still saying, what do you mean in N-? What are you guys talking about? Here's an example of what Jared is referring to. He's saying, you've got a lot of service meshes to test. And they each have their own, version. So, and if you've got this like exponentially complex, this set of permutations that you're going to go through where you'll say, great, so you're running Meshery v0.6 and you want to make sure that each of these, it orchestrates this service mesh at version 1.99 across each of these things. If you just stop the sentence there, that the number of permutations is quite high. That's a lot of combinations. And then you say, well, but not this type of service entry, like that type, like a private IP address versus a public. It's like, ooh, the number gets large. Then you put in Kubernetes, current Kubernetes version across all that again and all that again and all that again. It's like wow, you're barely even scratching the surface. You're barely even like like a 1/1000th% are you covering in terms of the potential combinations of what someone might actually be running. So there's a few things here. So one, the fact that there's that many combinations really speaks to the importance of a strong framework of automation around these types of around testing in layers, just like there's defense in layers or security in layers. So too is there kind of defense about quality in layers. That in part speaks to what Mario was referring to the other day around these different types of tests and at what layer they come in. And there's a big investment that needs to happen using different tooling at different layers and trying to amalgamate, trying to like bring forth a lot of that information, that test result info into a single pane, a single view to the extent possible. If you look at, I can't remember the Kubernetes dashboard for test infra something, I can't remember, but it is, if you look at it for Kubernetes or for the test dashboard, test results, the compatibility matrix that they have for Kubernetes and for OpenStack and other big projects, like, first of all, they're horrifically ugly. And that's in part because they're trying to deal with so much data and slice it in so many ways that Meshery is up the same creek, like in the same boat, like it has the same problem. We don't need to cover all the combinations to be fairly confident that things will work. We do need to cover quite a few of them. And one of the reasons why we say, hey, we're looking to support a lot of these versions going back is because the way that the software is built in the first place, a lot of it is, the components that we're using, they're auto-generated. We're programmatically generating the way that we're supporting these service meshes. We're also programmatically generating the way that we support Kubernetes and its versions. And so long as that code is done well, we shouldn't be experiencing a lot of hiccups, a lot of bugs in the execution of that code. If the code is auto-generated, it's generated well. When you execute that auto-generated code, it generally should be working. We have to verify, and that's what we're talking about now. And so, okay, fine. We're talking about verifying right now adapters and having them run some very high-level tests of like really what Ashish was pointing out was like lifecycle management of standing up different components of Istio, in this case, the ingress gateway, the egress gateway, Istio-D, etc. Good, but do they actually do what they're supposed to do? Like, are they passing traffic? Are they rerouting traffic? Are they configured? It's like, wow, that you really get into all those combinations. Then it's possible for us to dig into a number of those by way of service mesh patterns. Because if you take this as a pattern and you begin to express some things like, I mean, like to really test it, you need an application deployed. You probably need some load generated. You need Kubernetes up and running. You need the service mesh deployed. And then you need a way of defining what tests you're going to do, like what config you would have. And then a way of asserting whether or not the system behaved like you wanted it to. It's like, huh, we already have all those, like basically all those components. If you think about SMI conformance testing, that's what that is. If you think about, and so that brings up the other issue I was going to mention before, is that like we're doing some of this a lot of the same things in different areas. SMI conformance testing uses, like Jared had pointed out recently, it's using in part Cuddle as a library to define its assertions and then verify whether or not those things are true. So it's using a piece of tech there. We're using GitHub workflows here and some GitHub actions that have been created to do some of this. And we're using some bats in some other places. Anyway, there's opportunity for reuse and refactoring that needs to be considered as we go to heavily invest into a few different frameworks. Need to comprehend and like the build and release, the test, there's a master test strategy, a design document that's in the Google Drive that is essentially a blank document. Like it really needs to itemize things like I just said, that there are these types of testing that need to be done. These are the tools that are being used in those areas. Here's how they underlap. Here's how they overlap. Here's how that's going to be reported out. To your guys' point, like, yeah, this very quickly becomes extraordinarily unwieldy. Like it's pathetically naive in its approach. Moreover, these are integration tests. Like, where's the compatibility matrix? Well, that's a whole different section. Like the info from these needs to be pulled out and then laid out very clearly that, like, for any of Meshery's integrations or its dependencies, like Kubernetes and these service meshes, yeah, there needs to be a much different way of navigating the info here, and a bunch of summarizations. Jekyll is going to be like, I was working on grouping by what Ashish had actually intuitively mentioned, which was grouping these results by service mesh in this case. So Jekyll as a framework only takes things so far. But that's an aside. Like we'll get the presentation of it figured out. The testing of it though, like, so hopefully as soon as I'm done haranguing everyone, Devendu is going to say, yeah, he's going to bring up the test case spreadsheet and show us what integration coverage is going on for Meshery server and what's being tested with it. Yeah. What we're doing thus far, most of it is all net positive. The only potential negative is not reflecting on the way that we're using something like Cuddle versus the way that we're using GitHub Actions and using GitHub Workflows. We don't want to be investing, having to sustain two different approaches in this regard, because it's really just the same thing. When you do, people very soon, I don't know, Jared, we might see this in the next quarter, especially as Cilium Service Mesh comes over to say their data plane is better than everyone else's data plane, or more performant anyway. We're going to see a lot of people wanting to use the SMP action and then publishing their results, because otherwise it's going to be a war on he said, she said. Like, this one's faster. Yeah, of course it is in their environment, because they're not using a standard measure to do that. The thought being that service mesh performance as a standard independent measure is going to hopefully help level the discussion, level set the discussion and make some of that fair. Anyway, my point is that GitHub action might be used more and more. there's a lot of thinking, a lot more to go into this area.
Something that I've been trying to do with on our side as well, you know, thinking about from a test perspective, you know, because we have to worry about, okay, what are all the different platforms we support, you know, managed cloud environments besides, you know, manually created clusters using like KubeADM or something like that. And then also Kubernetes versions, the versions of Nginx service mesh that we support, you know, backwards compatibility, things like that. And what I've been trying to focus on more is like, what are we actually wanting to test here? And in this case, we're wanting to test Meshery and the Meshery adapters. You don't want to devote too much time to testing other people's service mesh specifically, right? And so kind of going back to some of one of the first things I learned in a long time ago when I started testing, you know, the 20/80 rule, right? So you have 20% of your tests cover 80% of your code there. So maybe just we could think about that when we're talking about these or brainstorming about these tests. Where can we get the most value for our time to catch as many things as quickly as possible, so that you could have less time spent on chasing down all these edge cases and making sure that the core product is very stable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're the perfect individual actually on the call to say something like that. It's such a great thing to say. It's like if there's kind of two things at work. The first one is, hey, why repeat the testing if others have already done that testing? And it's like, wow, yeah, we should be very aware of that and just try to marry that up to the extent possible that like so that there isn't just a bunch of duplication. Like you in specific is like, you're a perfect individual to be able to identify that line very clearly, if not just for Nginx Service Mesh, but like potentially for many of the other ones as well. And to uplift if some of those tests are public or what have you, is to uplift and to point to them and say, hey, if you really wanted to know more, like go see those. And if there's shared framework at all, or if there's like I was using the S&P action, GitHub action as an example, is like if performance testing, like part of the point is that performance testing could be done for each of the service meshes using some common framework. Be really helpful toward one of the goals in service mesh performance is to have basically a global dashboard that says, here's the speeds of these different service meshes. The second thing to what you'd said is that, the management software like Meshery has to walk kind of a fine line between someone having, if there is something wrong with Istio and Meshery isn't testing it, a Meshery user might experience it and blame Meshery, even though it was an Istio bug. And that's something to hold in the, like as the approach goes forward, you have to kind of hold some of that in the back of your mind as well. That's not a justification or an excuse for like going and testing a bunch more things. No, that's not it. It's like to help draw the delineation so that both the user and the individuals that are maintaining all of these projects to be able to direct people in the right way as to where to go to figure out the issue. And so Jared, I'm very glad. It was really cool that you just said that because yeah, I mean, it's a great principle to hold in the back of your mind as well about like, hey, look, why are we starting with, we don't have all of our unit tests done. Why are we starting way out here, this high level on integration tests? Well, it's for the principle that Jared just said, which is like, let's get these core flows down. Let's test a bunch of code in one fell swoop. And actually the tests that these integration tests are doing, this is like generally what does a user want to stand up a mesh and make sure that the mesh components are doing okay, and then maybe use them to do something like, yeah, and that's what these initial integration tests are doing. To Jared's point, these initial integration tests are kind of, they're really focused on like, is Meshery able to do the job, the Meshery adapter able to do the job that it said it would be able to do, which is lifecycle manage a given mesh. Can you, like the other examples that I was giving of like, can you tell Istio, tell any of these meshes to do a traffic routing rule, and does that rule work like it should? It's like, well, isn't like, that's good if Meshery can verify, you know, sure, but also isn't that kind of the responsibility of the mesh itself to make sure that that's happening? And it's like, yeah, it's a, you know, to the extent that these two pieces of software interact, it's something of a shared responsibility. But if the mesh is testing that stuff out well, it's kind of got those bases covered, like, you know, it should, and if it does, like, lean into that, you know, point to that, be comfortable with that. And
so, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's it.
So we've been talking about the integration tests. As far as an actual E2E test, are there any end-to-end tests where the Meshery is deployed in a cluster, just to verify it spins up? Is there an automated test that does that?
Yeah. So we should go right down. We should go clarify our terminology, not because just so that we can. Yes, actually, these tests are doing just that. These tests are provisioning a Kubernetes, deploying a Meshery server, and then deploying the point in time build of this particular adapter, and then doing the test from there. So we're calling those integration tests right now, like integration tests between components, but we should just go right down whatever.
Yeah, it sounds like an accurate nomenclature for that. What about the entire? So, like from a user perspective, I install Meshery Cuddle and do system start, where it goes ahead and spins up all the adapters and everything, just like a user would. Is that done as well?
Do some of the other guys, I'm talking too much. Do some of you other guys want to? Yeah.
So I think I have linked the workflow in chat. So we use in that end-to-end test, we use a published version of Meshery CTL, and we deploy it on both inside a cluster as well as outside a cluster, and we run through some scenarios testing various aspects of both Meshery CTL as well as Meshery server. So currently we have things like running performance test, deploying service meshes, applying service mesh patterns to test some the adapter capabilities and all those things. So I have been trying to work on in advancing this test to cover more use cases, both for Meshery CTL as well as the core Meshery server functionalities. So yeah, I think like this is what an end-to-end test is basically. So since we are using we are basically walking through from a perspective of how a user would use Meshery.
Okay, cool. I am a bit confused. It says this is a manual E2E test, line 23 there.
Yeah.
It should be. Yeah, maybe that's a good.
Yeah.
It should be the case that you can manually invoke the test, but it also so that anyone can just come over, you know, run the thing. But it also is set to run nightly.
Okay, I see.
So basically,
what about having? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just pointing out that like if we are running it manually, like we can just do a test with the pattern file we want, the performance profile we want, and all those things. But in the scheduled workflow, we run through different combinations of or different permutations of all those as well. Oh, Jared, go ahead. Like you were saying something.
Oh, I was wondering if there's a way to integrate a subset of these tests into each component, into the GitHub actions there that are run as part of the PR checklist. You know, based on the number of tests here, if they're running in real time, I'm assuming that it'll take, you know, a while to run through all these, and probably don't want that, but just one or two basic tests to ensure everything spins up and runs. That might help with preventing things from getting merged that are, if it breaks something.
You mean like the in a general build check, right? Like something like that.
Yes, and so I don't want to.
This is good. This is really important, Jared. Yeah.
So you know, a couple weeks ago, I found that issue that I couldn't deploy Meshery at all using the latest or the stable build, and I was, maybe it's just my system, I don't know, but I was a bit surprised that something that critical was able to get past the checks and get merged. And so that's why I was kind of thinking along these lines, like if you had one of these, you know, just a single one of those end-to-end tests that checks the build before merging, right? It would, you could catch these before they get merged. That makes sense?
Totally. Yeah. Some of it, yeah, I think it was on a specific adapter that, yeah, but basically that, like, if you take a look, here's the main Meshery repo, just a random example. I think this is the last PR to have been submitted on. And when you take a look at the checks that it's running today, now bear in mind, different checks will run based on different labels that are assigned to a PR. So we use the heck out of GitHub Actions, and we try to do it intelligently, you know, doing different tests for different things. In general, like one of the things that Jared, he's used this word in the past, and I think he's the only person I've heard use this word, and it's a good one, is smoke testing. And it's in part, I think kind of what he's referring to here is just like, hey, you know, like before, you know, like it's going to sound really funny when I say it, and he's trying to say it in the politest of ways, and which is like, hey, you know, before a PR is merged, like, wouldn't you just sort of stand the thing up, kick the tires, and then, you know, make sure that like at least it stands up and doesn't just fall over. And that's kind of what smoke testing is about. And so when you look at, it's like, okay, well, so what are we testing today? Just as, I can't remember if this was a Golang change or what. Yeah, must be. That happened in here. It's like, okay, for Golang, then what are we doing? Well, unit tests, yeah, good, and some integration tests. So the term integration there, we're probably not, we do need to go write down what our terms mean. For my part, it doesn't really matter to me quite how we define them. We just should try to define them so that we're all, you know, saying the same thing when we say something. But anyway, so we're building anyway, let's not walk through this whole thing, but to Jared's point is like, here's the right place to look. Are we doing that high level test of standing the thing up and making sure it doesn't fall over? Or those ETE tests that we were just looking at for the Meshery adapters, where it is just basically doing that. It's like standing up Istio, or because that was the example. Did these components start running? Okay, great. They did. Okay, great. Let's not take the test further at this point, but that was enough. It's like, well, so to Jared's point is like, yeah, yes. The answer is yes, that all of that, those workflows are highly reusable. You can call one to the next. And so to his point, it's like, can we be doing that on a per pull request basis, so that, you know, nothing breaks the build? Having broken builds is a really, you know, ugly thing. And more than that, can we be layering on top maybe some nightly builds? The reason to do nightly things is not to say, let's retroactively do and so here's regression testing, right? Comes in like, let's retroactively go back and test to see if anything was broken. Like, why aren't we just doing that at the point in time before we merge the thing? It's like, well, in part because of what Jared was saying earlier, which is like, there's a massive set of all these things to cover. So how many of these, how long do you want this thing to run? And how much of that do you want tested here? And it's not a hot mess, what we have. It's not. It's actually, there's been a lot of effort put toward it, but it's actually not written down in one. I mean, it's kind of written down in one place. It's written down what we're doing, the strategy, some of the strategy behind what we need to do next, though. Like, I'm looking like right at Mario, like right at Jared. You two gentlemen have, some of this is like taking candy from a baby in terms of like the type of impact that you could have on the project in terms of like, well, the things that Jared's saying right now. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to drop a link to the master test strategy that really needs to be flushed out better, needs to account for the things that Jared is bringing up. I do, and it's highly appropriate. We need for the project to never have a reputation of being of poor quality. Before we ever get there, and we're kind of in the danger zone with some of the experiences that Jared's had. Let's overcome that. And this is a great place for those that want to learn DevOps type stuff or things that fall into that, whatever DevOps means, that fall into that. It's a great place to go dig in. And it's a great opportunity. Like you really do have to reflect on the whole thing, because there's more opportunity for reuse than we're necessarily doing at the moment. So.
Yeah, that's and hopefully I don't want to come across as critical or anything like that. Everyone's doing an amazing job, and this is an amazing project, and it's a complex project. There's so many moving parts. I'm just working on the service mesh aspect of it, but you're abstracting that a layer up, which just adds almost infinite amount of complexity on top of that, with the compatibility and all that. Like you were saying, so many different versions, so many different configurations of Kubernetes, of a service mesh, and then you're trying to wrangle all that on top of it. So there's a lot going on here, and I just I want the project to succeed, and so that's why I'm raising these, and hopefully it doesn't come across as critical or anything like that. Everyone's doing great. In regards to the test, though, what you're saying, smoke test, that's exactly what I was point I was trying to make. For us, we have a subset of our end-to-end tests. Sorry, let me make a slight digression. At least in my mind, when I think of an end-to-end test, it's the experience that a user would run into. So it's running on a live system with everything set up the exact way that a user would have it. It's an integration test. You're testing, well, integration between components, and you may not have to have the whole live system set up. You might be able to somehow mock that up, let's say, or something like that. And then obviously there's unit tests, but at least when I say end-to-end tests, what I mean is the full live system, everything, nothing is mocked or anything. That's what I mean for that. And if we want to rediscuss terminology later, that's fine. Anyways, so for Internet Service Mesh, what we do is for every PR is we have a few end-to-end tests that run as quickly as we can, but like you said, just kind of kicks the tires, make sure that nothing, we just managed to slip through, and so we things there if anything major has been broken, and then we have a nightly pipeline that runs to test everything, run through all of our tests, all our environments. That might take a couple hours. You know, it's not very livable to have all of your PRs blocked for a couple hours based on tests. But, you know, that's where we have the nightly come in, like you were saying. And then every morning, you know, one of us will be just checking those to see the result of that. And I'm not sure what your process is for reviewing those nightly runs. Is someone taking a look at it to catch any bugs that show up?
I think the nightly runs just started. That we need that. I think the nightly runs just began a few days ago, like a week ago. Yeah, no, Jared, that's another thing that needs to. And there's automation to, like, I don't know that, I'm not sure if everyone needs another email, but that's why there are email rules. But yeah, Jared, like, for my part, I only receive what you're saying is like as exactly what needs to be done, one, and two, just coming from the best of places of, like, if you didn't care, you wouldn't be spending the time and saying this stuff if you didn't care. You wouldn't be going through the pain of trying not to hurt people's feelings while you're doing it as well. Like, but you are, and so someone needs to do that. Like, yeah.
Can I share something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so this is Mario. I think this is a great discussion, and about the results. I think the best way would be to have a Slack action that notifies in a specific channel whenever there's a failure, so that it's visible, you know. And if it's an issue with, you know, something's not configured correctly, you know, it'll be a bit bothersome, right, to some people, like just receiving a lot of things to specific channels. It's not an actual failure, but it'll help the community collaborate and make those kind of quality signals, you know, stable, and really increase the confidence, right? That's something I like wanted to share. And of course, try to reuse as much of our testing infrastructure as possible. But also, for example, I couldn't help notice this. So we have GitHub checks on pull requests. But my question would be, if a check fails, would that block a maintainer from merging? Like, is there some kind of restriction? Maybe I'm not that familiar with GitHub Actions, but maybe this is like a baby step question. But because I've seen merge requests with failed checks, so that's why I'm asking. Like, what point does it have to have those checks if there's no way of blocking a manual action, like from merging that request, if it contains potentially like unstable code, you know, like something's broken?
Yeah. The answer is yeah, or like yes. GitHub can be configured to disallow people from merging if there's a failed check. Now that is, on the surface, what a beautiful, like let's go turn that on. And then actually, I think this will take us past our time. The problem is it ain't so simple. Like, and
yeah, I figured.
Like without explaining it, I don't know if people can readily think of reasons why that wouldn't be, but there's a bunch of reasons why you should push forward. And actually, we were just like a great example here last week. There was there's a failed UI performance, I'm sorry, user preference in Cypress. We had changed something recently. The test needed to be fixed. The subsequent 20, 30 something pull requests that had nothing to do with user preferences, they all would have been held up for a week and whatever, a couple of weeks, while that other one was still failing, which had nothing to do with, it's like, well, if you enforce the fact that you can't merge with a failed check, then the whole project stopped. Okay, well, maybe that enforces like the right amount of pressure on it. on that thing. It's like, well, yeah, except when KubeCon is the next week, and then you can't like it like, yeah, it's the right goal. It's the North Star. We should get there. Absolutely, let's get there. but let's
my
address.
suggestion, yeah, my suggestion in there is to quarantine those kind of tests. You know, of course, that adds like certain level of risk of something going past by those checks if we're disabling a test. But if the idea would be that we would assume that risk in the scenarios where, you know, we would still want like yeah, I think that the risk of allowing a pull request with failed checks is even, you know, greater, right? Because, you know, it could be okay, but then there could be some scenarios where, okay, someone just before approving the check seems okay, but then again, there's some scenarios where, you know, someone push a commit, and then, you know, you're just there approving or merging, and then, you know, those kind of scenarios, or maybe just a common human error, you know, you just merge the pull request because it looked good, but then again, somehow it's the check is not okay, right? But, you know, that this kind of things, you know, we would need more discussion to find, you know, what's the best setup for us to get to a higher quality in that sense, right?
Let's say if we can, I mean, since it's here is, there are two documents. One is a test strategy. The other one is the build and release strategy. They're very related. There's a Google Doc for both. Mostly the build and release doc, all of what was in it is mostly been published in the Meshery docs. So it's just this one here that we need to flush out a bit with a lot of the things we've been discussing. And I don't think I've heard anyone say anything that isn't agreeable, or that like isn't needed. So we're just over time. I love the fact that like Jared in specific had pointed out an issue last time we met, and we're seeing action taken on that issue to help improve the quality of the project. Ashish, maybe last question for me before we end the call here, and that is, will you be able to propagate those end-to-end tests today across the adapters?
Not audible. It's like his voice got so small.
I swear I heard a yes in there, so I'm going to take it as a yes. Awesome. Good. Anyway, I think we're just out of time. There's a couple of things we didn't cover. Please, let's raise those in Slack and help make sure that anyone's unblocked, or people need feedback and things. Otherwise, we meet on Friday for the community call. So we're going to have a year in review on Friday. We might call on a few of you to gather up some info about things that have happened over the last year, some things that have changed. So some of you, it would be great if some of you were presenting what that is. So, all right, anything else from anybody before we head out? Nice. All right. See you all on Friday. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.